This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
Got an impactful conversation today, and this is about something that may be affecting you. You might not even know it, or maybe somebody that you're connected to. And it's 4 letters. You've heard them before. But what do they mean? PTSD comes in many different shapes and forms. When we hear those letters right away, we often think of our military. And not to take anything away or minimize any situation, they've been through a lot. But PTSD also shows up in other forms in our everyday life from things that we've been through. We're going to talk with somebody who helps people with this all the time. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and also a certified family mediator, and offers amazing therapy and insight. He's our professional of the year. Gary Santucci is back with us. Hey, Gary, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Steve. How you doing this week?
Very well, very well. And happy we're talking about this, because I think there are some misconceptions or misunderstandings when it comes to this thing called PTSD, which stands for
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
What exactly is it?
Post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, post-traumatic stress disorder can be a number of things. Usually it's triggered by an event that is obviously very traumatic, such as an accident, for example, a natural disaster. Violence can trigger PTSD. It was, historically, we started learning about it from the military, from wars in the past. The war in Vietnam really brought it to the forefront. Back in early, World War II and all that, it was called shell shock.
Yes.
And you remember that term, okay? Vietnam became post-traumatic stress disorder. And in all of the military altercations we've had since then, there's been a number of cases of people that have gone through the military and have experienced the violence and have experienced the things that they have seen that's caused that reaction to those memories of them going through that situation. And now we have it we talk about it more in civilian life, and people that have gone through all of these events that I talked about, like, for example, automobile accidents or just natural disasters. Just in our recent past, with things like severe hurricanes or tornadoes or the fires that have gone on out west have created a tremendous amount of PTSD with people going through those experiences. And it's very, very difficult. It's very scary. It shows up in a number of different ways. It creates a lot of intrusive memories that are very, very difficult to face. You don't want those memories, but those thoughts creep into our brain and really impact us. They impact our moods. They impact our thinking. They impact our behaviors. We avoid things that have caused those triggers. So we avoid going to certain places after we've gone through a trauma. Some people avoid driving if they've been involved in an accident. Other people will, stay away from situations that could potentially be violent, so they don't go to certain places. There's such things as, the thinking and the mood isn't really affected by this. So there's more irritation, more irritability. Could also be coupled with maybe some depression. And it could also, be amplified by, say, somebody that's dealing with substance abuse. So there's a number of different factors that come into play in dealing with PTSD. It's not something that goes away in a day. Sometimes it takes a long time to go through that, Some people that are suffering from PTSD, like you said earlier, don't realize that they are. And so maybe the traumatic event happened a long time ago, and you have not received any kind of treatment or therapy or help to deal with that. And so here it is that maybe years later that you are now dealing with it. Something may have just triggered that, to bring it to the present. So there's a number of different factors here that play into PTSD.
Is it always a trigger?
I believe it's always a trigger. And those triggers aren't necessarily something that you're conscious of. Most of the time it's not. So, you could be walking around a corner and something happens that triggers that. Yeah, it could be a song. It could be a smell. If you went through the trauma and that trauma created a certain smell, like, for example, fire. Okay, fire obviously smells, and that could easily trigger that trauma again coming back to you.
Mm-hmm. I want to share a situation just happened 2 days ago, and it kind of illustrates what we're talking about. So I'm at an event, bunch of friends, and a girl passes out, and she's kind of dropped, and there was tons of people around, but nobody was really helping her. So, like a friend, wanted to help but didn't know what to do. I'm not trained in anything. I just ran over there, checked on her, ran and got security. While they were waiting to come over, I got a cloth for her forehead. She started coming to. I think she was either just dehydrated and, yeah, but she seemed like she was going to be all right. But dial 911, the whole situation. In the end, she looked like she was okay, and they transported her. I was with a friend, very close friend, and all of a sudden I'm like, "Where's my friend?" And I was like, "Oh." I had another friend go find her in the bathroom. And what happened was her husband a few years ago unexpectedly dropped in the driveway. And then I put the two together. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even think of that. And that's what was going on. She got triggered and just got away from the whole situation. And then, we found her. She was okay, definitely shaken up a little bit. But, when you talk about a trigger and PTSD, there was in real time. And I apologized. And she goes, "Oh, it's okay. You jumped in. You wanted to help somebody." I was like, if I would have thought of it, I didn't even think of it. I just, but.
Right. You just reacted to it.
I just reacted. Yeah.
And
as
did
she.
By avoiding the situation. She got herself out of that situation instantly.
Yeah.
And that helped her cope with what took place whenever that took place in her life.
When those situations come up and we are triggered, and let's say we know there's a trauma in our life that there is going to be PTSD, and we know we have it. What's the best way to deal with it? And in her situation, she got away from it. It was still impactful, and she wound up having a great day after that. But what should we do?
Well, there's several things that you can do. One of them, obviously, is therapy. And I think that's a very important part of being able to deal with it. And in therapy, we use a lot of what is called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Okay, a very common form of therapy. Many therapists use that for a wide range of issues and disorders. Okay, and that is one of the most effective ways of dealing with PTSD. A combination of different treatments is also available. So, for example, if you're using CBT, generally there is medication also involved. Generally with what is called an SSRI, which is an antidepressant. SSRIs are focused on one area of the brain, the serotonin level, and that's all they target. So that also can help. There's also therapy called EMDR, which is an eye movement desensitization process. Okay, and that is used primarily for people that have difficulty verbalizing trauma. There's some people that have a great deal of difficulty verbalizing trauma because it is so impactful. And so when you have that, EMDR is one of the therapy modalities that are used. But mostly CBT and medication is probably the best, most effective way of dealing with PTSD. And also, there's a number of other factors. Okay, the person has to be invested in that. There has to be certainly engagement from the patient. Okay, you have to be with somebody that knows what they're dealing with as far as PTSD. You don't want to be with someone that knows nothing about that. That's not going to be effective. Social support is also a factor. With not so much family. Family is important, but some people don't have family. So where do they get the social support? You can be in group therapy. That can be effective. Community groups with veterans groups are real important. So those kinds of things can help. Okay.
Mm.
And they're mostly, but it is patient engagement. How willing is the patient to really effectively facilitate a change? And that's just not easy. It's just not easy because you're reliving the trauma. And you don't want to relive the trauma. You want to avoid the trauma. You don't want to ever have to deal with that again because it was so incredibly impactful on your psyche.
Does it ever go away when you've suffered a major trauma? Is it always going to be a part of you? It's more about dealing with it. And I don't want to, I don't have a better word, but minimizing its effects on you.
I think that I don't know that it will ever go away permanently. I think that some of those traumas leave an indelible mark on our mind and we never lose that. I think it's really kind of like managing it. So if there are signs and triggers that come up, that you have the tools and the techniques to be able to manage it. And so CBT can help you with that. EMDR can help you with that. Support groups can help you with that. All of those things can help you deal with those triggers. And again, those triggers can come from anywhere. And those triggers may never appear again. So you may go through the trauma and experience the PTSD maybe a couple of times and never experience it again because the triggers aren't activated. But there are people that those triggers are activated frequently. And that's a very difficult thing to deal with. So they develop other ways of dealing with, like avoidance, for example. I'm not going near that place, okay? I'm not ever going to drive a car again, that sort of thing. And so I think that, again, it depends on the individual. It depends on the trauma. Depends on what kind of treatment is that they're using, and depends on the people that are giving the treatment. So there's a number of factors.
We identified some types of PTSD. Just to illustrate it even deeper, what could be considered? Maybe something not as traumatic as the example I gave or some of the other ones that we're talking about that you mentioned. What can be considered PTSD but may not appear to be so for the rest of us?
Let's just say that you're in a work situation.
Okay.
Okay, and you're being bullied.
Mm.
Okay, or maybe in a school situation and you're being bullied. Okay, and the bully is just intense and it never goes away and it's constant, very frequent. That can easily trigger a PTSD response. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Something along those lines. If you're in a relationship and you're being abused, verbally, mentally, physically, sexually, all of those are factors that can also trigger PTSD.
Wow.
You can also have like a situation where, for example, you have a physical reaction to something. Say you are eating something and you choke, okay? And you feel like you can't breathe and you're going to die, okay? And somebody comes along and administers aid and you're okay after that. But that event can trigger a PTSD episode, so that anytime that you eat, you're very worried. So you're very careful about the foods that you eat, that sort of thing. Noises, sounds, like certain sounds can can trigger loud noises. Okay, like I said earlier, smells, that sort of thing can also be triggers for that. So,
What's the difference between a PTSD situation and a phobia? Like, let's say somebody's afraid to get on a plane. Maybe it's coming, maybe it's PTSD. Could it be?
it could be. Certainly, it could be. You may be on a plane, and maybe the plane had a very rocky ride the previous time, bad landing, that sort of thing. You ran into some weather on the flight, and you experienced, some difficulties on that plane. That may impact you the next time you fly. So when you get on a plane, anything that goes slightly wrong is going to be amplified by your thoughts.
Is it going to be the actual situation? For example, let's say you were in a bad car accident, a crash, and
Mhm.
now you have apprehension about getting on a plane. Would that be connected to that PTSD from the car crash?
It could be.
Hmm.
It could be. You feel like you're unsafe. You go into a plane, you're unsafe. You're not flying the plane, so you don't have control of that. Maybe you were in a passenger in a car, you
Right.
weren't driving the car, so you didn't have control of that. All of those factors can cause a trigger and cause you to have a PTSD episode.
Have you
Absolutely.
worked with people that presented a challenge? Maybe, go on the flight one. Somebody's afraid to
hmm
get on a plane,
hmm
but it's actually connected to a PTSD situation from the past. Is it possible that we don't even know that there is a connection, and or when you work with somebody, do you discover that?
Well, yes, you would really want to check that and see if there's any history
Hmm.
of any trauma that occurred that you could connect to the present. And most of the time there is, but there are those times. Maybe you saw a movie that caused you to look at things in a way that I'm not going on that plane again. Maybe you saw a movie with a plane crash.
And that could be PTSD.
That could be PTSD. Okay.
Wow.
And
Okay.
it also, there's a very fine line in that case between PTSD and a phobia. The fear of flying, because I saw that movie and that plane crashed. There's no way I'm going near that airport.
Wow. Okay. Seeing this in a different light now, because those four letters conjure
Right.
up an image of something very major,
Mhm.
understandably so, but apparently doesn't have to be. I never even thought that, a movie, but everybody's different. If it affects you in a certain way,
Yes.
then
There are
that's
different levels of PTSD. It
okay.
can be very mild, and then obviously it can be very severe. And, the severe cases obviously are the ones that are more difficult to deal with, more difficult to cope with. Whereas a mild episode is something that, well, for example, maybe you did see a movie and that caused apprehension as far as, I don't know if I want to go on that plane right now. I'm just not comfortable being on a plane right now. But if you have a severe episode, that's something that is going to impact you in some serious ways.
The different types of therapies that you mentioned, EMDR, um,
Mhm.
do you do those?
I don't do the EMDR, but I do the cognitive behavioral therapy along with desensitization. So desensitization is a form of, you're bringing the person slowly, baby steps to deal with the trauma, okay, to show that, that trauma is past and that you can overcome this slowly and confidently and comfortably. But, that's a process. That takes a little bit of time. I
Hmm.
think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago about, someone had a phobia of being in an elevator. And so we did some desensitization to get that person on the elevator. I walked the person on the elevator. We stayed there, and then we got off the elevator. And then I got the person to be able to go up to one floor and get off the elevator. And before you know it, she was able to go on the elevator with much less difficulty. I'm sure there was still a little apprehension, but she was climbing 20, 30 flights of stairs to get to a high rise.
Wow.
It's good exercise.
Good
but-
exercise. Always got to look at the positive, you know.
That's right.
That was there. That was there. And I'm
Right.
sure everybody's different. You know,
Yeah.
it might take a few sessions for somebody. It might take a few years to
Right.
desensitize somebody and walk them through that journey of PTSD.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with the patient engagement. How willing are they to want to overcome this? You know, some people are afraid. We talked about fear a few weeks ago. Some people are afraid to face that, and it is very scary to face that. Traumas are very scary because you think that the worst possible thing is going to happen, and when you're in those traumas, sometimes you're in those traumas instantly. If you're in a weather situation like a tornado or a fire, that's instant. You don't necessarily have time to plan that, and it's you're basically reactionary for all that. And when you are reacting to that, you're trying to process it instantly in a matter of seconds, and then that stays with you. All of that stays with you. So afterwards is really when that settles into your mind and the fears begin, and the impact of the trauma really begins to affect your whole life in some ways.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so misunderstood. And again,
It is.
we connected to the military, and I want to say probably the general population thinks it's only that. Those letters are just reserved for military situations.
No, it's not. It's
Yeah.
definitely
Mm.
it can happen in so many different situations, And I think what we're finding too is, weather situations are increasing. Our storms are getting greater. We're seeing more fires. We're seeing more tornadoes. We're seeing stronger hurricanes, flooding, etc. And people are being impacted by this. The recovery from this is unbelievable, especially if you've lost everything. You've been injured in those weather events, and those have lasting impacts on you. Lasting impacts. Mm-hmm.
Final questions here. Do you feel that a good part of the population in general, because you said the different levels of PTSD, most of us have it, or some shape, some situation that would be considered PTSD?
I think there's a lot more of it that we're just not aware of. And I think most of it is along the mild form as opposed to severe. I think that when you have like a mild form of PTSD, and maybe, like I said, a very slight incident that occurs that you can cope with just basically on your own. We learn how to cope with that. We can learn how to cope with things in our lives, okay? And sometimes when it's more severe, you need help to be able to learn what kind of tools and techniques are available. And you can apply those tools and techniques to helping you deal with the PTSD, which is probably the better way of doing that, through therapy, possibly through medication, a combination of the two, having a good support system, being able to talk about it instead of keeping it inside. I think it's much more difficult when you keep it inside, because I think keeping it inside causes you to impact your mood, so you're more irritated, you're more agitated. Okay, you're just not a happy person in that context. It's very difficult to achieve a sense of peace and calm when these traumas are going on inside your head.
Very challenging, because it can also be very personal, where you might not want a lot of people to know.
Right.
So then you're not going to speak about it, but it's kind of counterproductive, because you need to get it out. You need to purge it. Mm.
Yeah. The longer it stays inside, I think it gets stronger.
Wow.
It gets stronger and rules your life, dominates your life.
Gary, how do we connect with you if somebody is challenged by this? Maybe they know somebody who is, and at least want to start a conversation to some healing. How do they find you?
You can reach me at 954-474-1119. You can text me my cell at 954-817-1401. My website is GarySantucci.com. And you can email me at GarySantucci74@gmail.com.
And Santucci is Santucci, GarySantucci.com.
That's correct.
Thank you for today. I am very happy we talked about this because for many of us, we don't really understand it. And we could have loved ones going through it and not even realize it, maybe even ourselves. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. We'll be right back.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.